beat and run, won't it, Mark? But I don't know because I've only seen the highlights of the games. I haven't actually seen a full Huddersfield game yet. I'm not sure what it is that's actually making the difference for them this year so far. Looking at the way the scores built up and the stats and the comments in here, it strikes me that it must be something to do with their attitude in defence that's really giving them a good early start here.
Yeah, because well, it is the case that they've conceded the fewest tries per game so far this season, so their defence is strong.
So even though they're conceding, the same amount of meters, not making more meters, not making more breaks or less breaks, but they're keeping people off their line. And
the highlights from this game in particular highlighted it, didn't they? Because they showed 2 or 3 times in the first half alone where the goal line defence from the Giants held the Hull KR side up either in goal or they got to the ball first to force a drop out when it was looking promising for the attacking side and things like that. So you're right, their defence is on top-notch form. They are really working for each other this side.
Yeah, and if they can keep that up, they'll be competitive for the rest of the season. But it's a long season, but there's no doubt it's a very good start. And if any set of fans deserve a little bit of success at the moment, I think it's probably the Huddersfield fans. They've got to put that bloody cowbell all the time, Mark.
So, I mean, in this game, one of the forwards that's been impressive for them, James Gavey, he got injured. It looked at the time like a very worrying injury. It was a sort of upper back, neck type injury, but it seems like it's not as bad as first feared for him. So that's a positive thing for the Giants. The other forward who started the season in great form is Suya Matungi, and he grabbed a try and actually all the plaudits from this game as well. He got the Man of Steel points, he got the Albert Goldthorpe points. It seems like, and he jumped out on the stats as well, so it seems like he was the star of the show here. And also, there's a lot of talk about Caesar and what he's doing for the side, and I questioned how Gaskell could work with someone else coming in and properly taking charge. And actually, it's freed Gaskell up. And Gaskell's the other player I'd pick out maybe from what I saw on the highlights and stuff who seems to have been a bit of a star player here. He's finding some space for himself. He's finding some scores. And, he scored a nice try in this game as well as the Louis Senior try as well. They looked quite good options on that left side, because we've always thought of Huddersfield over the last 5 years as a right-sided attack, with Jerry, with Cudjoe, with Mellor when he was there as well as a strike weapon in the second row, and now actually that left side's producing some fine strike options as well. Arguably maybe Rovers scored the best try with that diving finish from Ben Crooks, but you can't take much away from the Giants, I don't think, overall.
No, and it's going to be really interesting to watch them in the coming month to see whether they can back up this start and turn it into a really solid foundation for a good season.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to the final game from Friday night, and this one became more interesting than any of us were expecting, I think, but ultimately the end result was what we expected. It was Warrington hosting Toronto. It was 22-12 at half-time, but the Wolfpack pulled it back to 22-all before Warrington had a late flurry of penalties and a barge over from Big Ben Murdoch-Masila to make it 32-22 in the final reckoning. 11,182 were there, which I think is a good crowd for a game against the Canadians. And Scott Michalauskas was the referee, coming over here refereeing our games. But
the old joke's still the best.
Didn't hear anything about Scott Michalauskas in this one, so that's the positive, isn't it? In terms of the stats, this game had the most offloads so far this year, the Wolfpack having the majority of those in that 26-15 count. It was 7 breaks each, but Toronto did make 7 more handling errors, and Wire made 259 more metres at 1.4 metres per carry, better average gain. So it does seem like Wire were more controlled in their performance, even though both teams broke each other the same amount of times individually. Sarah's favourite, Matty Ashton, grabbed his first Super League try. He had 5 tackle busts and 168 metres and 2 clean breaks as well. He did pick up a bit of a hamstring injury, which might be a worry for the next couple of weeks, but another strong performance by him, reflected in the Man of Steel points as well. Tom Lynham, a try assist, 142 metres and 2 clean breaks. Toby King, a try assist, 5 tackle busts, 107 metres and 3 successful offloads. And Josh Charnley with 1 try, 159 metres and 2 clean breaks. For the Toronto side, Andy Ackers grabbed a try and 43 tackles too. Blake Wallace, 138 metres. Ricky Litelli continues to impress, 115 metres for him. And Adam Sidlow, a try assist, 105 metres and 4 successful offloads.
And Macca says, whoever did that possession is 9/10 of the law was obviously not from Toronto. It's one thing to try and play an expansive game, but you are not going to win at this level if you're turning the ball over in the last 20 minutes like that. They need to find their biggest strength and build a game plan around that. After a month, it's no wins, no home games, and no Canadians on the pitch.
Alan Walker said, "Oh, Tony G, so sad to end up playing with such poor players. Only John Wilkin is any good, and he's not even getting paid. They say should have gone to Bajo Geckos." And then there's some emoji that hasn't come through on my version here.
It looks like a gecko, I think. Anyway,
oh, right, okay, fair enough.
Mike Dodd 22 says, "Why I should have put Toronto to bed after racing into a 16-0 lead. But a combination of some errors and some flinging the ball around from Toronto ensured it was a nail-biter before Big Ben sealed it with 2 minutes to go. I hope that Toby King is given the try assist for Toronto's second try on the stroke half-time. It was a very good pass."
That was Andy Ackers, wasn't it? They kind of jumped in off the back of a scrappy ruck and stole the ball away and went through to score. Lee Whitnell said, "Well, we made hard work of that one. Early on, it all looked so easy. In attack, we were carving them up, with Ashton a constant torment, and defensively, we looked unbreakable. Then we decided it was all too boring and played like a bunch of fucking muppets for 30 minutes to let them back in. Without 2 unbelievable Charnley interventions, we'd have lost this game well before Big Ben secured the win at the end."
Tom Eckley says, "First half hour, only guy that looked interested for Toronto was Sonny Bill. Then Warrington tried their very best to throw it away, and thanks to a few drop balls by ex-Wires over the line, Toronto probably deserved to win. Ratchford wasted in centre, but Widdop showing some nice little touches. Any reports suggesting Warrington may have been a little bit inaccurate judging by this?"
POB 1976 said, "Toronto will feel hard done by after running wire close. A forward pass in the build-up to Widdop's try was missed by the officials." Yeah, that was Lynham's pass, and I've watched this back a few times because I can't work out if it was just a really weird sort of netball style pass that was blown forward on the wind, because it was such a sort of...
it was given air.
Because it was a pass that lacked any sort of purpose. So it just sort of was...
When I was watching Mark, I yelled forward.
Right, okay, fair enough. I'll stop trying to defend the match officials on that one then.
It was an interesting game to watch, this one. I mean, highlights are funny things, aren't they? When you're watching the highlights of a game, I'm not sure you get the full sense of how the game was and who was competitive and who wasn't. But just from watching the highlights, it looks like a pretty bloody close game, because we were crediting Huddersfield's defence before. Warrington's line defence was really good in this game, because there were at least 3 tries that Toronto could and maybe should have scored, which were denied by really good Warrington defence, including one before the winning score from Murdoch Masilla, where I thought Toronto were going to score in the corner, and under pressure he dropped the ball as he was hitting the line.
Yeah.
But they stopped 2 absolutely certain tries in the first half as well.
Warrington. There was one in the first half, Matty Russell. I thought, because I knew Matty Russell had scored a try, so when I was watching the highlights, I assumed that was when he scored his try. And you sort of half look away from the highlights and then realise Charnley's pulled off an absolute blinder to save the try there.
Really.
Yeah.
Tackle of the round.
The key second half one you talk about was actually when it had got to 22 all, and it was, or it might have been that they'd just gone ahead with one of the penalty goals, but it was.
Ratchford have put him ahead with the penalty.
Yeah, it was Hakeem Maludi, wasn't it? And again, it was Charnley who put the pressure on him and sort of knocked at his hand, and he dropped it.
Yeah.
Now, I must admit, as well as watching the highlights and reading the match report, once Navarrete got sin-binned and I knew that game was over, it was still on the television, but I spent a lot of time looking at my Twitter feed for this game to see because this game had become the exciting story of the night, hadn't it? And so I was spending a lot of time watching what was going on in this game, and I think there was a sense that maybe the Hakeem Maludi no try was closer than it really was, but ultimately the match officials got it spot on, and it was good defence and poor execution in attack. But this, I think I'm right in saying this is Toronto's highest score so far this season. They're clearly making themselves competitive in games, despite the selection issues they've got. I mean, they had two outside backs who hadn't played in Super League yet on the bench this year. For this game, how many teams would be putting two outside backs on the bench? Not many.
Exactly. No, indeed.
And although Warrington, to be fair, had an undersized bench, Louis Johnston as the sole prop on the bench, he's not a big bloke. Matt Davis as the other forward, not a big bloke. So there was. The Wolves were undersized too in this game, I think it's fair to point out. But even though Warrington won, and I think credit goes to Ashton for being very exciting, Charnley for being good, on the stats, he scored a try as well. You could see from the highlights a couple of times where he got them out of trouble getting out of his own end, and also, which is an important part of a winger's job these days, and also those try savers. But the story kind of becomes the Wolfpack because they were so close. They got so much back into this game.
They were, and obviously Saints get to play Toronto at the same venue this week, so I'm really looking forward, to watching them live in the flesh rather than on the TV. They clearly carry some threat with the ball. Even though they make a lot of errors. So it ought to be an exciting game. Obviously, I hope we will sort them out. But they do carry threat, and they give it a go. They're not just trying to grind it out defensively. Now, whether that turns out to be a mistake for them in the long term, I don't know. But certainly, a game watching Toronto play is not going to be a boring game.
No, and you can argue they scored the highlight try of this game. I mean, Matty Ashton's try, that pace, that's exciting. But Gareth O'Brien's try from that Macron break, a try from deep.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a nice play. And, I mean, I'm going to have to try and stop myself sicking up in my mouth when I say this, but you have to give some credit to John Wilkin as well. I mean...
It'll be interesting.
He turned out to be one of the Wolfpack's better players in the game.
Yeah, I mean, he was their player of the year last year. I mean, I think, No,
but in this game, he wasn't supposed to be playing 3 hours before kickoff. The coach didn't even seem to know that he'd gone out to warm up, let alone play.
No, but, I mean, again, just watching the highlights, he was in the thick of the action, basically acting as a pivot. The passing looked good. It did look like John at his, one of his better games, and he went both ways. He was tackling very well as well, and put some, looking at his stats, he put some good marker tackles in during the course of the game. So that's John when he's playing really well. I hear he's maybe a bit injured for this week though, so it's a shame if he is.
Well, we'll see if he actually it goes through with that knee clear out that he was supposed to be having, that he was supposed to have ruled him out of last week. But we'll see. That operation was put back, and he played a solid game off the back of it. They'll probably want to get him right for when they're back in Toronto, though, because that's where they'll feel maybe like they've got more chance of stringing a few wins together. Right, let's move on to Saturday's Super League fixture in the afternoon there, in some pretty torrid conditions, I think, down at Salford. Very, very windy occasion as Leeds came to town.